Hello everyone, welcome to Logi Talks, Voices of Global Trade, the podcast where global trade professionals share real operations and behind-the-scenes logistics. I am Marisol Pérez, and I am here with Kevin, Juan, Diego, and Hanna. Today, we are bringing you a fascinating and detailed breakdown of a project that challenged all our skills in logistics, trade law, and strategic planning.
Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a unique operation that required planning, strategy, and a lot of coordination. It wasn't just a matter of moving something from point A to point B. It was a case that involved art, law, global regulations, and tight delivery standards.
We are talking about a full international logistic operation, exporting a life-size wax statue of Hachiko from Mexico City to Istanbul. This wasn't just about transportation, it involved complex classification and highly specific customer requirements.
And not once, but twice. Once for a temporary exhibit and once as a permanent donation to a wax museum. Each required different strategies, documents, and legal approaches.
It was a fascinating challenge with two custom regimes, legal planning, packaging, and of course, logistics. And today, we're going to talk you through every single detail.
Let me walk you through the start of this project. Our company, Transportes Globales S.A.D.C.B., received two distinct requests. One was for a temporary export of the statue to Istanbul, Turkey, where it will be displayed at a prestigious international art festival. That means the piece will return to Mexico after a few months, and that is why we will be using the temporary export regime in this operation. The second was a permanent export as a donation to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. This meant the statue would stay in Turkey indefinitely, and we needed to ensure full documentation, transfer of ownership, and legal compliance. Here, the definite export regime will be used in this export. Each client had specific requirements. The gallery needed support for installation, precise temperature and humidity conditions, and even permission to use the statue's image in promotional materials. The museum requests perfect delivery conditions and full authenticity documentation, including a signed donation letter. We started with a full project plan, defining every step from origin to delivery. This involved route planning, timing estimates, packaging coordination, cost evaluation, and legal checks. Our role as a logistics operators involved more than just transport. We had to think ahead, coordinate with multiple agencies, and ensure every step complete with both Mexican and Turkish regulations. We were responsible for making sure the client got what they expected on time, in perfect conditions, and legally secure. This wasn't just a shipment, it was a delicate cultural piece moving internationally with strict handling protocols.
Now, let's talk about the legal side of this operation. For the temporary export, we work under RGCE 3.1.5, which is the regulation that allows temporary export for exhibition, trade shows, or cultural events without paying taxes, provided the item return in its original condition. This rule requires clear justification and proof that the item will not be altered or sold. In addition, RGCE 3.1.6 provide tax exemption under certain conditions. Thanks to this, the export did not incur standard export tariffs, which help the client avoid unnecessary costs. The Custom Declaration Code B1 was used for temporary export with a cultural purpose. This involved a specific documentation process include an event invitation, a customer contract, and a precise timeline for return. In terms of paperwork, we complied a comprehensive export documentation package, commercial invoice, packing list, transportation insurance, export permit, and an invitation letter from the Turkish gallery. Each document had to be translated, verified, and matched with your product information. Foreign trade law in Mexico and international standard shaped how we handled this entire process. These legal frameworks define who goods must be traded during export, how taxes are applied, and how responsibilities are distributed between parties.
Now, let's look at the full logistics chain. The origin of the shipment was the Wax Museum in Mexico City. The destination varied. For the temporary export, it was Sarastro Art Gallery. For the permanent one, Madame Tussauds in Istanbul. Both final locations are known for their strict standards for artwork handling. We choose AICM, the Mexico City International Airport, as the departure point. It has infrastructure designed for fragile and high-value cargo, including temperature-controlled areas and international cargo clearance capabilities. This allowed us to maintain the piece integrity during the transfer. Packaging was one of the most critical aspects. The statute required a custom crate tailored to its shape and size. We use materials like foam, moisture barriers, thermal insulation, and shock protection to minimize risk during transit. This packaging cost is around $1,400 US. The transportation costs were about $2,100 US that included international air freight, national land transportation, and insurance coverage. The general logistics costs cover custom brokers, document preparation, and supervision, about $900 US in total. We then assembled a full quotation for the client, showing all costs, services included, responsibilities, terms, and expected timelines. This allowed the client to review and approve everything with the full transparency possible.
Before we could even export the statue, we had to understand what it was from a meteorological perspective. This meant studying its physical structure, materials, use, and origin. The statue was made from kerosene wax, reinforced internally with metal, and designed as a realistic representation of the dog Hachiko. It wasn't mass-produced and had no commercial utility. It was an artistic piece. Based on that, we classified it under Ligi Code 9703, period 90, period 99, which refers to original works of statuary or sculpture, regardless of the material. This classification was essential because it determined that the piece was tax exempt during import and export. To support this classification, we used complementary rules that specify how handmade art should be handled under this tariff code. These rules made sure that we complied with custom expectations. We also applied legal notes which confirm that only original, fully handmade works by the artist are accepted in this category. Since our statute met that conditions, it was legally protected under that hearing. Finally, explanatory notes from international customs references helped confirm our classification and facilitated customs clearance in both Mexico and Turkey.
Wrapping this up, we had to make sure we were legally protected across the board. Customs law defines how goods are processed at the border. For us, it meant that every step, from documentation to physical inspection, had to meet regulatory standards in both Mexico and Turkey. We also dealt with administrative law, especially since customs is a public entity. This required clear communication, formal procedures, and official responses for any adjustment or request. Then, there was an intellectual property. The statues, image, and identify belong to the artist. We had to secure permissions for exhibition, photographs, and promotional use. We made sure contracts protected both parties. Although Turkey is not part of an international trade applicable to this logistics operation, international trade agreements around the world share similar principles. These treaties establish common rules regarding tariffs, customs documentation, and product treatment, ensuring smoother transactions and legal clarity across the borders. Understanding these frameworks is essential for operating efficiently in the global marketplace. Finally, the last mile delivery required completely legal and logistical compliance, from customs clearance to final assembly. Everything had to be smooth and perfectly documented.
Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to answer some of the most common questions we get when we talk about this operation. I will start with one for Kevin. Kevin, what was the most challenging part of dealing with the legal side of this export?
Great question. I think the biggest challenge was ensuring the documentation aligned exactly with customs expectations, especially with temporary exports. Even small mistakes in timing or document content can cause major issues. We had to be extra careful with the declaration format and making sure all legal justification were supported.
And not to mention staying on top of changing regulations. Laws can be updated, and one missed update can result in non-compliance.
Here's one for Diego. What would have happened if the packaging wasn't designed properly?
Honestly, it could have been a disaster. The statue is fragile and sensitive to temperature change. Bad packaging could lead to breakage, melting, or other damage. That's why our packaging strategy wasn't just about protection. It was about preservation, presentation, and professional standards.
Juan, I have one question for you. How did you calculate the cost so precisely? What tool or method did you use?
We work with detailed spreadsheet and market quotes. Every cost from fund pending to custom agent fees was itemized. We cross-checked it with previous operation and include a margin for unexpected expenses that who we stayed with in budget and still covered everything.
Hanna, can you explain why intellectual property is such a big deal in logistics?
Absolutely. Logistics doesn't just move physical goods. Sometimes you're handling products that involve brands' rights, copyrights, and public image. In this case, the Hachiko statue is art. Its creator has rights, and the clients needed permission to display and promote it. Without respecting those rights, we risk lawsuits or restrictions.
Marisol, what would you say was your biggest takeaway from this project?
Honestly, I realize how multidisciplinary logistics is. You need to know law, engineering, negotiation, finance, and communication. This wasn't just a delivery, it was an international collaboration that required precision and professionalism every step of the way.
And I think it also showed us that even something as specific as a wax statue can be the center of a complex, full-scale logistics operation if you treat every case with that level of care. You can handle anything in this industry.
Exactly. It was learning experience on every level. We learned from each other, from the law, from the operation, and from the client.
Marisol, before we go to the next section, one quick question. What would have happened if we had submitted the customs document late or with errors?
That could be serious. Customs could hold the statue at the border, causing delays or even denying export clearance. And since it was time sensitive for the exhibit, the whole event could be been a risk. It's a reminder that in logistics, precision and timing are everything.
And what if the client in Turkey hadn't received the right certificates, like the authenticity or donation letters?
That will be trigger legal and custom issues on their end. The item could be rejected, taxed, or detained. We anticipate that by preparing bilingual documents, double-checking legal requirements, and staying in close contact with the client. In operations like this, you don't wait for problems, you prevent them.
So basically, a good plan is what makes the difference between smooth delivery and disaster.
Exactly, every step matters, because one small error can turn into a global headache.
Now we move on the one of the public favorite section. Welcome to our myth boosting corner, where we break down popular misconceptions in the global trade and logistics.
Today's myth is not all artworks are automatically tax exempt.
A lot of people think that if something is art, it just skips over customs duties like magic. But no, it's not that simple.
Exactly. Tax exemptions for artworks depend on classification, origin, purpose of export, and even the legal status of the artist.
In our case, we had to prove that the wax statue was an original, handmade sculpture. That's what made it qualified for the Ligi Code assign, which granted tax exemption. According to Mexican customs law, Article 64, exemptions can only be applied when the merchandise is properly classified and supported by sufficient documentation, including expert opinions, legal notes, and complementary rules. Without that legal backing, the authorities could deny the benefit and will be facing full import-export duties.
And if that statue had been mass produced, machine made, or used for commercial sale, boom, taxes would apply.
So next time someone said, it's just art, don't worry about taxes. You know better.
Know your codes, know your rules, that's a real masterpiece of logistics.
So that's our journey. 25 key topics, 1 real operation, and 5 professionals making it happen. Logistics is a science, an art, and a legal challenge, all rolled into one.
From legal strategy to packing tape, every detail counted in this case.
We didn't you learn the theory. We applied it step by step in a live international settings.
It proves how much knowledge, planning, and teamwork logistics really takes.
We hope this podcast inspire you to take logistics seriously and creatively.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope this inspires more students and professionals to love logistics as much as we do. This was the podcast Logi Talks, Voices of Global Trade. Until next time, see you!